Today, I want to talk to you about eating in France. I think when a lot of people come over to visit, it's the dining experience is so different. France is not a service culture like the US. I have seen waiters yell at people. I've seen waiters kick people out of restaurants for being rude. Waiters have more authority than they do in the US. They're not working on tips typically. They usually have a salary. Some of these salaries are very low if it's like a summer type job, but you can actually make a living working at a restaurant, and there are plenty of people who do make a good living working in the food and beverage industry here. They are paid more of a fair wage than in the US, where servers are paid, I believe it's where I am from in South Carolina, I think it's $2.13 an hour, $2.13 an hour. So anything that they make in tips is really what is supporting them. It's not an easy life, and it's not a job that you can support yourself off of easily. So it is very different here. They are not working for tips the same way that servers in the US are. So I think when people have bad experiences in France and people say things like the French are rude, I think that stereotype may come from some bad experiences at restaurants. I'm sure there are plenty of other reasons why people have come up with that stereotype, but in general, I think the French are very kind. I've had wonderful experiences here, but I think it's important to know that it's very different, the culture, especially around dining. I think it can be very shocking to someone from the US. So some things to know, like I said, tipping is not the same here at all. Servers are not working for tips. So when you tip, if you go to a nice restaurant for dinner, €5 for 2 people would be a nice tip. If you go get coffee, you don't necessarily have to tip. You can leave 50 cents on the table. That would be nice, but it's not expected. And it also depends on where you are. If you're in a bigger city, you may tip more than if you're in a smaller town. But I would say in general, like if you're going out to lunch or dinner, maybe €2 per person that's a nice tip. Talking to different French people, they have given me many different answers. The one that I get the most is probably €1, €2 for a meal. And a lot of people say they don't tip for coffee. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just telling you what people tend to do here. But even the French can't agree on what the perfect tip is in my talks with plenty of French people. Whereas in the US, I think most people would agree 20 to 25% is a good tip. It used to be like 15 was pretty good, but it's kind of gone up over the years. But it's a hard industry to work in. And so there is a big difference between the way we tip. Like I said earlier, it is not a service industry here. So you trust the chef to make the best meal that they possibly can. The trust is really in the chef. You choose a restaurant because you trust the person who's cooking there. And even if you don't know them, but that's the idea. So if you go into a French restaurant and you have all these demands like salad dressing on the side, no tomatoes, take off the olives, you might not get as good of a service. You might annoy a server or the chef by changing their menu. And I'm not talking about allergy restrictions. I'm talking about just being a picky eater. If there's something you don't like, don't order it. It's just, it can be offensive to try and change everything. And I know that's different because in the US, we're so used to being able to modify anything. It's rare that a restaurant will tell you no, whereas here, it's not something that people do. When you arrive at the restaurant, you'll have water on the table typically, so you can serve yourself. And then if you want to order a drink, you would order a drink from your server. Because the water's on the table, it's not necessary for your server to come over to the table as often, and they won't. Most servers they'll take your order, they'll bring your food. They may check on you one time. That's pretty rare too, that they come to the table often to check on you. So you'll have to flag them down at the end to pay. Servers tend to leave people alone. They're not trying to rush you off. Mealtime is so important here, and people tend to take long lunches. Some people are given 2-hour lunch breaks during the week to enjoy their food. So getting a hold of a server can be tricky, but it's something that is it's something my husband really had a hard time adjusting to when we were in the US. He's French, and when a server would come interrupt us when we were having a conversation to check to see if we liked the food or to take our order, he would get so offended. And I've heard other French people having this problem as well. They're just not used to people coming to the table as often. And since servers are not working on tips, they don't have to worry so much about if everything is okay. But it's really kind of nice to not have the interruptions. And if you need something, it's polite just to look at your server or hold your hand up to get their attention. When you're ordering, you typically have a carte and a menu. So your carte is what we would call a menu. It's their everyday, what they offer, and you'll probably be handed that when you are at the table. Then you have your menu, which is like a set meal. In the menu, you have an entrée, plat, et dessert. So your entrée is like what we would call an appetizer. It's not really an entrée like we would say an entree. So your entrée is your appetizer, your plat or plate is your main course, and then your dessert is your dessert. You can order your starter and your main course. You can order just the main course. You can order the main course and the dessert, or you can order all three, and they will have set prices for these depending on what you want to order. And this is a deal. This is like, it's usually their special of the day, and they just put these 3 items, or sometimes you can choose multiple, like they'll offer multiple entrée, plat, et dessert, and you choose from those. But if you choose off of that menu, you're paying a set price. Whereas on the other menu, it may be a bit more expensive to add up different courses. You can also sometimes find that on their regular menu or carte. You can find these menus. So it's just good to know. You may want to order off of the menu, or you might want to just order off of the regular carte, which is the menu. I hope I'm explaining this well. It's really confusing because we use different words like menu and entrée. We use these words, but we use them in different ways than the French do. So I know it can be a bit confusing. If you have questions about it, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to explain more clearly. And the last thing I wanted to say is you typically pay at the end of the meal, which in the US we pay at the end of the meal as well. But something different is when you're at a coffee shop or at a place where you might like order at the counter and sit down and wait for your food, you're still going to pay at the end of the meal most of the time. Not at fast food restaurants, but say at a cafe where you maybe would go up to the counter and order something. You might order a beer or something, and you would go sit down at the table, or a coffee and sit down at the table. If you did that, you would pay afterwards. And you would probably go up to a counter to pay, unless the server comes around and you can pay them directly. Drinks are a little different than a meal. But then your meals, if you're at a restaurant where you're sitting down and having a meal, you would actually go up to the counter a lot of times and pay. Sometimes they'll come over with a card reader and let you pay that way. But typically you would not, you'll never give them your credit card. The French do not want to be responsible for your credit card or cash. They will come over with a machine, or you will have to go to the counter and take and present your card or cash at the counter. In the US, we're so used to seeing the bill, giving them our card, they take it away, they run the card and bring it back, and then you can tip and sign, the receipt and everything. All of that is just handled at the counter. So if you're waiting on your server to bring the bill, they may have already left a ticket on your table. Sometimes they'll do that, and you just take that to the counter. So you don't necessarily have to wait on your server if you have that ticket on the table. I hope this can help if you're traveling to France or if you've just moved here. Dining is definitely a different experience, but it's so wonderful. There are so many wonderful restaurants, and I hope you'll get to experience a true French dining experience. If you have any questions, like I said, leave them in the comments below. Thank you for following along, and please subscribe and check out some of my other content. Thank you.